Good morning, dear friends. It's such a pleasure to cooperate once again with the Nueva Economía Forum and now Forum Europa Division. And of course, it's a great pleasure to be accompanied by our colleague and friend, Esther Lynch. Dear Esther, let me confess that I feel very proud to have fought alongside you for a fair Europe. I want to thank you for your courage, your commitment, because after as a General Secretary of the ETUC in December 2022, we managed to put social rights more firm on the European map. We managed to speak with one voice about the importance of building a social Europe that is full of opportunities for everybody. These last few days, I must also confess that I have been asking myself what we want when we talk about a social Europe. We want a Europe where citizens have equal opportunities. We want quality jobs that offer decent salaries and work-life balance. We want gender equality, and gender equality means the same rights, the same opportunities, and the same wages for men and women. We want workplaces that are safe and that protect the physical and mental health of the workers. We want to protect those who are often excluded, like people suffering homelessness, of young people, unemployment. Really, dear friends, we know that building the pillar of social rights is a huge team effort. We know that we are going through a crucial moment in the history of the European Union. After the pandemic, I think we have all learned clear lessons. We are stronger together, and working together as a progressives, we are able to successfully face today's challenges. Friends, our decisive contribution to building a fairer Europe cannot just be part Social Democrats, it's incompatible with any opening up to the far right. We will be a firewall against the far right through the European Union. We will be the essential force for defending our social model, a social model that is unique in the world. We will show that it's possible to have a union that innovates, competes, and grows without cutting back on workers' rights and without sacrificing our welfare state. A union with a strong social pillar inspired by La ULP Declaration that guarantees new labor rights with quality internships, the right to training, the right to disconnect, and the conditions for remote work and artificial intelligence in the workplace. A union that remains faithful to our social model and guarantee decent jobs, rising wages, minimum living incomes, and anti-poverty strategy that will lift 50 million people out of poverty. No force can stop our eternal aspiration to achieve a union of equality between men and women. Dear Esther, you became the second woman to hold the post of Secretary General of the ETUC. Let's continue to demonstrate that women's aspirations have not limits. Let's put an end to the injustice that women suffer through the European Charter of Women's Rights, the revision of wage transparency to include all companies regardless of their size, and the inclusion of the gender-based violence in the list of the European Union crimes. Dear Esther, our journey together has not finished. You have been a brave trade unionist since your first joined a union in a factory making microchips in the 80s. You are a strong leader and a person committed to the highest European values. Let's fight with all our courage, all our commitment, and all our loyalty to make social rights felt in every home, in every workplace in the European Union. The future must be and will be social. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. García, for your introduction. Now, I would like to welcome on stage Ms. Esther Lynch, who will deliver a speech before a question and answer session.
Thanks so much. No. Well, this is a great way to begin a Thursday. Thanks, everybody, for being here, and thank you, Iratxe, for that really powerful introduction and for paying me the huge honor of introducing me. You're right, we're working really well together, both as people, but also as organizations. Thank you for everything that you're doing today. I know that you need to leave, and it's important that you do that. Thank you for standing up for working people, their families and communities. And also a huge thanks to Forum Europe for inviting the ETUC to be here today and to have an opportunity to say how we can strengthen the union. Now, this was immediately a problem for me because whenever I say the union, I mean the trade union. Whereas many people in the room, when you say the union, you mean the European Union. So I'm going to rely on everybody here knowing the meaning when I say union, whether it's going to be European Union or whether it's going to be the trade union. If anybody has questions, we can take it up at the end, which one I meant. So I think I also have a fairly simple nutshell answer. If anybody is to say to you, what did Esther say was the main way to strengthen the European Union? She said quality jobs. And that's what the speech is going to be about. It's going to be about a roadmap for how we get to quality jobs. What are the challenges we face, but importantly, the solutions, because nobody wants to listen over breakfast to a long list of complaints. What you want to hear is solutions and the way forward. But I do think for the working people that we represent, it's important that I do flag some of the problems that they have. Because this dissatisfaction that workers are feeling with the European Union largely comes from the dissatisfaction and problems that they have in the world of work. There's a genuine feeling, not just among workers, but among large parts of society, that for a lot of people, things are not going the right way. Things aren't fair, working people aren't getting a fair reward, even though they put in a hard day's work. They're being asked to do more and more, faster and faster, less reward. Contracts, and in particular the psychological contract, has got a lot thinner and more fragile. There's a lot less trust, and instead there's more supervision, more surveillance, more punishment. Fear has all too often become the go-to tool of management,
And I don't know what the management schools have been teaching, but I see more and more that being the way in which people are managed. And then on top of that, we see insecurity, price increases, housing becoming unaffordable. And how I would describe it is a feeling that my working life is so much better than my parents'. My son and his friends, their life, their working life, has more in common with my parents than with me. And they can't really see the way in which they get to the working life that I have. A secure pension, prospects, a career, I know what's going to happen. Young people struggling with not having that. Now, before I go any further, I also want to say that that contrasts sharply with a lot of great employers who provide great jobs with a future, who invest in the workers, who invest in the workforce, who make sure that people, if they have problems, that there's solutions there for them. And instead of being encouraged and supported, what we see is that they're being undercut and challenged. And so what we have is a formula that supports not only the workers who are struggling, but also those companies who want to do the right thing, of which they are the majority. So that's why our first recommendation to Ursula von der Leyen that you can bring, Iratxe, is that it's not a time for backward-looking reforms. They can't fall into a trap of a backward-looking approach based on deregulation and less rights. Can't fall into putting trade unions or any of the institutions of social dialogue into question. Competition isn't only about the cost to the company of doing business. It's also about the framework in which companies operate. We should be proud of our standards. There's companies here who are leading the way on the green transition. We should encourage, respect, and valorize them. We shouldn't look towards rowing back on any of the standards. Instead, we should invest in the companies, invest in the workers to make that just transition. The common set of standards provides guarantees not only of environmental and health and safety, it's also a way in which we can be proud of the products we produce. People like to buy things made in Europe because they know there's a guarantee. There was no misery in the production. There was health and safety rights of the workers, and the product itself is one that you can rely on. We should talk that up, not challenge its existence. Instead, as I've said, it's time to mobilize a project of hope to deliver quality jobs, where all working people have a good living, a fair day's pay for a fair day's work, enough time to spend with their family, the ability to bargain through a trade union so that you have a fair share of the profits, but also that you can retire in dignity. Quality jobs, every sector, every region. Quality jobs, all workers, no matter what job they do, no matter who they are, where they're from, or who they love. And Iratxe, you were so right. That's why we worked so hard to get the Pay Transparency Directive, to put equal pay on the map. Not just flat-out discrimination, but also that indirect discrimination that has existed for so long, that allows people, companies, employers, or society to think that cleaning and caring is low-skilled work. It's not. COVID proved that that was essential, life-saving essential work. And that's why we want to put the pay on the table of carers and cleaners to say that equal pay for work of equal value means you need to look at the value that that job is providing to the company in a more realistic way. It's going to be challenging, but it's going to be exciting too. It's going to be the next wave of the equal pay story for all of us. We're also looking for concrete backing for legislative demands, and I very much hope in the programme workers will be able to see a clear list, and I'm going to speak very quickly about what they are. I know that we'll probably have time in questions, but first and foremost, we need a European industrial plan for quality jobs that ensures the green and digital transitions and a just transition become a reality. Now, working people have been told that they won't be left behind, but they look at what the reality is, and the sad fact is a lot of workers are being left behind. Our research shows that the number of people employed in manufacturing has fallen by 853,000 between 2019 and 2023. For sure, some of that had to do with COVID and all of the problems associated with the wars in the region, but it's also about the problem of deindustrialization because we are decarbonizing. What we see as the solution is investment for companies, so that companies can make the transition, so that the companies can succeed, but the investment can't come as a blank check. The investment needs to have social conditionalities, meaning that the workers will succeed attached to them. We also need to make sure that member states have the money to invest, that companies have the money to invest. That's why we need a permanent mechanism at European level. We need a directive to give the guarantees to the workers that they'll be involved in negotiating and managing the change through their trade unions. And that needs to be backed up with guarantees. A guarantee that redundancy won't be the first option, a guarantee of access to training, a guarantee of supports to find another job. For this reason, we're looking for a just transition directive to accomplish this. We also need to revise the EU public procurement directives. It's unacceptable that public money goes to companies that undercut, that try to compete on the basis of cutthroat wages and bad terms and conditions. Instead, what we need to do is to make sure that our public money works for us to achieve the social objectives. And what I'm talking about is a collective agreement with fair pay and conditions. That's what I'm talking about when I'm saying that we need public procurement rules to protect a collective agreement and the ability to fight for fair pay. It's about respect for the worker and the work that they do. We also need to regulate the role of labour intermediaries and to introduce a limit on the amount of subcontracting that can happen, but also we can't have a situation where more and more workers don't even know who their employer is because of the long subcontracting chain. They think the person they're meeting is their employer, but it turns out there's 2 or 3 people in between that. That's an abuse, it's a loophole, we have to close it because it's a threat to the strength of our union based on the threshold of decency of standards that we've all agreed on. The challenge of artificial intelligence also is looming large and is on everybody's minds. We need to speak to that, not be afraid of it. We need to welcome science. We need to encourage and innovate, but we also can't do that naively. We need to make sure that we have a moral imagination of what might go wrong and put in place the laws to prevent that. It will be a catastrophe if we're trying to fix things after the artificial intelligence has been introduced in an unfair way. Let's stop it happening in the first place. And then finally on the list for directives that we would very much like to see mentioned is psychosocial risks. And I just want to talk very briefly about this idea of ethical stress. So I meet more and more workers who talk about burnout and stress. And when you dig a bit behind it, what they describe as circumstances of going to work and not doing the job that they want and believe and their vocation, their career, their occupation, they know needs from them. I'll give you an example. Let's think of a nurse. Let's think of a teacher. A nurse knows a patient is struggling and wants to spend the time with them and can't because of the number of patients that they have to see. They do that day in, day out. They go home upset that they weren't able to do the job. And they get up in the morning knowing they're going to have the same difficult day of not being able to give the care that they were trained to give. Same for a teacher, struggling student. You know you need to spend the time with that student, but you don't have that time because there's so many other children in the classroom. That's what we're calling ethical stress. And it's in lots of occupations. Workers want to do a good day at work, and it's stressful for them when they can't because they're not provided with the time, the equipment, the support, to be able to do that. And the solution for that isn't more monitoring and surveillance and fear. The solution to that is investment, cooperation, discussion, support, pay. It's about breaks. It's about, making sure that people can do the job. And that's why we very much hope that the idea of the psychosocial risk directive that allows us the opportunity to discuss how we deal with the growing insecurity. And I think a lot of the labour shortages are intimately linked with this question of ethical stress. Then finally, we need to build on the Val-Duchesse Pact. The recent Le Hoop Declaration importantly reaffirmed the indispensable nature of effective social dialogue at European level. It's a fundamental concept of our European social model and of our European democracy. Because European democracy isn't only about elections every 4 years, every 5 years. European democracy also comes from being part of your trade union. It's how you practice your democracy in your everyday life, in your working life. Trade unions bargain not only for fair wages and working conditions, but also for lots of other stuff that's relevant in the world of work. And we provide an important check and balance on power in the workplace. And that's why we must put strengthening trade unions and collective bargaining front and centre in the discussion on strengthening the European Union and a European Union based on quality jobs. All too often, collective bargaining is entirely absent, and increasingly we're seeing American-style union-busting practices making their way into Europe. That should be outlawed. Collective action shouldn't be outlawed. Union busting should be outlawed. We very much are looking for member states to put in place the collective bargaining coverage so that we can reach 80%. And I look here around and I see leaders in that field from the business community. I see business leaders here who know the value of social dialogue, who know the value of collective bargaining, who know the value of trade unions, and who have the skills to make that work. I go to other rooms and I meet employers who don't have that, who see that the way in which they want to deal with trade unions is to keep them out of the workplace. The way they want to deal with social dialogue is to make it into lobbying, not dialogue based on problem solving. And all too often, I think that all issues are approached in a manner which is to say who's right and who's wrong, rather than what are the different interests at stake and how do we address those in a positive manner. So I think that all the supports that you can give, all encouragement you can give to your colleagues in the business community to work with trade unions and to understand the value, I would like to ask you for that and to thank you for the work that you already do with us in a very real way to come up with real solutions that can really work in real life. Then, just the elephant in the room, and I say this because I know there's a lot of economists here, and they'll be very angry if I don't mention it, and they'd be right to be angry, because it is the elephant in the room, and the major hurdle is that we adopted in the European Union a set of economic governance rules that will mean that member states will have to make choices in the coming period. And I very much hope that the choices that are made in the coming period are choices that lead to a thriving enterprise, thriving workers, quality jobs, solutions, not ones made on cuts to public services, because we need public services to have an environment for thriving business in the real economy. Not one based on cuts where the poorest have to pay. Not one where children go to school hungry because we've cut the benefits that their parents are given. Those choices are not ones that the trade union will support, and I ask the business community not to support them either. Demand better. Join us. Join us in saying this is not the right approach. join us in saying we need investment now. The investment we have now will provide in the future. We don't need cuts. And so to ask you to join us in that. We've been on the streets, we've been saying no way we won't pay, the trade union movement will do that, but by working with the community, with business community, we can do better if we jointly call for investments. Investments to make the green transition, investments to make the digital transition, and for that to be made in a way that guarantees the success not only of the enterprise, but of the workers too. That is how we will strengthen our European Union. So, to conclude, I thank everybody for being here this morning. I hope you've enjoyed your breakfast. I know that we're going to have an opportunity for questions. So I give over to our moderator. And I'm not sure if I stay here for the questions.
Yes.
I stay here for the questions, so I'll stay and get the questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lynch. As in previous events, the question and answer session will be moderated by Mr. Chris Burns, journalist. After the Q&A session, Ms. Lynch will have a few minutes for closing remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I welcome your questions. Whoa, we got them already. Fantastic. I mean, I've got one question for you, Esther, and we know each other from past events and so forth. You laid out this number of objectives that you have, the accomplishments that the Parliament and the EU have made regarding employment. Considering the new constellation after the latest European Parliament elections, how hopeful are you that you can accomplish these objectives with the Parliament, including with Iratxe, but how optimistic are you, or pessimistic are you? And a bit of a rough start with the Hungarian presidency, I believe, right? Any comment on that?
I'm always optimistic. And the reason I'm always optimistic is because no matter what happens, the solution always is to unite working people, to build that relationship between working people. We do it through trade unions. We don't only look after trade union members. Collective bargaining boosts everybody's position. There's a lot less inequality in an economy when you have higher levels of collective bargaining. So I'm confident that trade unions have the tools to resolve the problems. The challenge of doing that workplace by workplace by workplace is that we get more inequality and more dangerous competition rather than positive competition. So we would need to do it without the Parliament and the Commission. We would then need the business community to come with us. But I'm also confident that we can get there. If you take the Antwerp Declaration, there's some stuff in the Antwerp Declaration we don't agree with.
But you were there, by the way, when that was signed. It was calling for an industrial deal to complement the Green Deal. Right?
For quality jobs, an industrial deal for quality jobs.
Yeah.
So business agrees with us. We need an industrial policy, an industrial deal, in particular for energy-intensive industries at this moment, but not just that. We need it for a digital transition. So I'm not convinced that there is as much disagreement on that as is being made out, and that's why I'm so disappointed that Ursula von der Leyen isn't already out saying that she's going to have an industrial deal for quality jobs. And I'm so disappointed that she's not sitting down problem-solving and setting out what the legislative initiatives are that she's going to have. There's no reason not to do it. We need to stop the grandstanding and all of that. Now's the time to get down, roll up our sleeves, get over ourselves and sit down and do it. Now, in saying that, we're very clear the far right has nothing whatsoever to offer to working people in their communities. They talk a good talk, but every single time we went and asked them to vote on any issue in the European Parliament, they voted against working people. So the only people that completely support what Iratxe has said, which is to keep the far right out of that discussion. So I think that we have enough with the progressive, we have enough with the EPP, we've enough with the Social Democrats. Put on top of that the Green Group, Renew, we've enough people there to do a deal, to do a good deal, and one which will really deliver for working people. So I'm optimistic. I'm frustrated. Okay. I'm not depressed, I'm not despondent. I'm more frustrated that things are not moving faster and clearer.
Okay. If we can keep the answers a bit brief, because we've got a lot of questions coming in and very little time. From the UGT trade union, the recently approved I guess, rerun of the EU's fiscal rules represents a dangerous return to austerity policies that had negative consequences as opposed to a fairer, more efficient form of governance. This is more of a statement. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I completely agree that there are member states which have inflicted on themselves now a set of economic governance rules that will require choices, as I said, but more importantly, it reinforces the need for an EU-level investment instrument, and that's a discussion that we need to force faster. But as I've said, we don't agree that those fiscal constraints should have been adopted without the instrument being in place, but most importantly, also without guarantees to say that the member state can do everything it can to achieve the European Pillar of Social Rights and all of the rights that are set out in the pillar.
Okay, a question from EFAT. Abusive subcontracting and unregulated labor intermediation are structural issues that are feeding an exploitative business model. How can we address these issues during the current EU term?
What we need is a legislative initiative to limit the length of the supply chain, to guarantee that workers know who their employer is, and to have joint and several liability, because it's unacceptable that a company comes along, puts in a tender, wins the contract, and then says, well, it's news to me that the workers are not getting a collective agreement. It's news to me that there's no health and safety. What can I do? We have to stop that. That's unfair competition. We need to stop that throughout Europe and in every sector. And of course, the building and construction sector that Christian represents is, Christian is here, that is a sector where he can give lots of examples of that being the day-to-day reality. It's not a rare occurrence, it's a regular occurrence.
Okay. Can I back up to the UGT question is actually on the Verso side here, that's why I missed it. About austerity policy, could this be addressed with a fairer tax system, including taxing the richest, special taxation on excessive profits?
Yes. So the situation is that working people pay the most amount of taxes in the European Union. It's not by a small amount, it's by a long amount. Capital pays very little. We need to shift and have more taxes, in particular on windfall profits. We've seen during the past period extraordinary profits in some companies and some sectors. They need to pay their fair share, and they need a fairer system of taxation, in particular on wealth, needs to be put in place.
Okay. From Stefano Spinacci of the European Parliament, democracy at work. How to advance on this subject, how that can reinforce our democracies, democracy at work.
The European Union already has a good law on worker participation at work. The problem is that it's not being properly implemented everywhere, so it absolutely needs to be reinforced. But also it needs to be advanced, and there's a proposal for a directive, and we're very much supporting and backing that. But also we need to reinforce collective bargaining and the right to collective bargaining. We need to make sure that trade unions can be in the workplace, can meet with workers and discuss with them. That's one of the big challenges that member states need to face up to and live up to now when they implement their national action plans for collective bargaining.
Isn't that part of the minimum wage directive, which has been approved and is to be transposed by November? How hopeful are you that that could help democracy at work? That's my question.
Yeah, so having a say is what's important in democracy. It's having agency and involvement on the outcome. It's about having the facts so that you can make choices, but it's also about influencing the decisions that are made. Collective bargaining is the key way to do that. That's not just about pay, it's about the decisions on the company. It's about whether AI will be implemented, whether or not it will be implemented, how it will be implemented. All of that is best done through collective bargaining. But for collective bargaining to be genuine, workers need to have access to their trade union needs to have access to them, and there needs to be sufficient coverage. Importantly, at sector level as well, because sector level is an important way to overcome competition on the basis of pay and conditions within the sector. So that's why we very much support the introduction of the action plans, but also legislation underpinning those action plans, also to guarantee sector-level collective agreements.
You mentioned AI. Here's a question. You mentioned AI as a key topic for the future of work. What are your concrete ideas of what needs to be done so that it benefits workers and the workplace?
We need a guarantee for the management of the introduction of AI in the workplace, that unions can be involved in supporting workers at the level that it's being introduced. But also we need rights. We need guarantee of the precautionary principle. So you don't introduce something if there's a risk that it won't be safe until you can put in place the measures to make it safe. We need to make sure that there's always a human making a decision, that you can always get to the human and make the decision. The worker needs to be in control of AI. It's not the other way around, that the AI will be in control of the human being at work. But also, and I know a lot of people here have heard me talk about this, I'm concerned about how AI will interfere with the relationships that we all currently have at work. Thinking, for example, I know I don't have much time, but please let me make this point. Like when you check into a hotel, by the time you get up to your hotel room, you're going to have on your phone, had you a nice check-in? Was it a smiley face or an unhappy face check-in? You get that all the time. And I always say yes, because you don't know what the previous person has said. And it's hard enough for that worker checking you in without you having to feel nice about how they did it. The fact that you're checked in is good enough. The fact that they provided you with the service is enough. Now, if you put into the hands of an unscrupulous employer artificial intelligence that can measure your emotion in every single second of that interaction, it means that interactions are never going to be real. They're going to be highly managed by the worker. So they're going to have to deep fake being happy all day, every day, if you're in a service profession. And that's not going to be acceptable. And we can stop that simply by saying no emotion management in the world of work. That's it. And then AI can be used for all of the benefits that it can bring. Because it can bring a lot of benefits. It can do a lot of good things. But we need to have the moral imagination to prevent it doing the bad things. Don't put something good in the hands of somebody who wants to use it for bad purposes. Prevent the bad use of AI. That's what we're saying. We're saying have an imagination about what might go wrong and prevent it before it happens.
Okay, AI as a tool. Regarding this is from the DGB, regarding the climate and digital transitions, we need to ensure that the transitions are just. Which instruments at the EU level are needed the most to ensure these results?
There's two important tools. The first and most important is collective bargaining, and we've talked about how we make sure that people can join a trade union and to bargain. The second one then is legislative tools. Legislative tools either to provide a framework of rights, a threshold of decency for everybody, but also legislative initiatives to provide for the investments. We need a joined-up approach between all of those. So collective bargaining supports real solutions at the level of the workplace, but backed up with a good set of rights and investments.
Okay, let's see. Let's move on to this sector of solar energy. Is solar energy a great partner for European industry for getting better and more jobs?
Yes.
Can you comment on that sector?
Yes, the answer is yes, for sure.
Okay.
The challenge is the grid. It's not the solar. Right. The real challenge is making sure that the grid can bring the solar energy everywhere. And that needs investment. It needs a plan. It needs a European industrial policy plan to make sure that all of the great benefits that we will get from solar energy in Europe can get to the people who need to use that electricity. So the answer is absolutely and unreserved. Yes, the piece that's missing is the plan for the grid.
Okay. This is from Alex Sable, MEP. You mentioned stress and burnouts as one of the biggest challenges faced by the working class. Is it important for the Commission to, sorry about that, about the directive on the right to disconnect. Yeah. That's a very key issue. I think at the moment there is a consultation on that, right?
Yeah, so not only that, we have one of the leaders in the European Parliament here with us who's been advocating so strongly for the right to disconnect, but also for the right to telework and for the modalities of that.
That's right.
Look, I mean, I'll be honest, everybody here knows, like, one of the biggest disappointments of my life was the inability for us to be able to negotiate an agreement with the employers so that we could have a directive that we developed and put forward, because then it would have worked in the world of work. The past, I have to get over it, but as you can hear, I still have pain about it. But now what we need to do is to have the directive legislated in the usual manner in the Parliament. Commission to come forward. The Commission is currently bringing that forward. There's a negotiation where, there's a consultation with the social partners. We're inputting into that. And we hope and expect to see within a very short period of time that piece of legislation. And it's so important, and this is one of the strengths of the European Union, is that we will know the baseline rules that apply to telework and the right to disconnect throughout Europe. You won't have to deal with a whole lot of different rules. It will be throughout Europe. We'll have a baseline of rights and entitlements that will apply. Now, importantly, this is what we were trying to do this is what the trade union side was trying to do in the negotiation, was to provide for local negotiation on the modalities to make it more effective, to make it more, more appropriate for that particular enterprise, that particular sector. I don't know whether that would be possible in this other way, but it wasn't us that we didn't turn our back on that approach. So business community, you need to ask your side why that happened. But we're very much behind the directive, very much behind the persons leading for that, and calling for it to come into place for us, because the world of work needs it.
I think a related question from Sede. We do agree on many points, such as the need to review the public procurement directive, as you talked about, and the key role of investments. But member states are very divided. How to ensure a pro-European approach to accomplish that?
So they shouldn't be so divided, because it's already possible in the public procurement rules to decide something other than the cheapest price as the reason to give a tender. You can choose to say, well, we give the most economically advantageous, or we can also include in that social reasons to give a tender. So that's already possible. What we need to do now is move from it being possible to it being mandatory. We need to require the tender, the people deciding on the tender, to look at the quality of the work that's going to be provided. Is this tender on the basis of cutthroat terms and conditions? Or is this tender on the basis that it improves the lives of the workers? They've done it in America. They've done it very well in America. What they've done is they've said, for example, if you have a construction tender, that you include in that a certain number of apprentices. That you include in that the collective agreements. It's basic stuff. It's making sure that the public procurement contract is going to somebody who's a quality employer giving quality jobs. That's it.
I moderated an event recently at Norway House there's an Oslo model, it's called, where they do work public procurement in that fashion. And they say it's working.
Yes.
And business is on board. So,
yeah.
Interesting. Here from the ETF, workers in many sectors are facing shocking levels of stress, understaffing, mental health problems. How could or should a directive on psychosocial work address these issues specifically? I know you mentioned it, but maybe you could be more specific.
Yeah, there's two. So Europe has a labour shortage of truck drivers. I can't remember the number, but it's a couple of 100,000 of truck drivers is a labour shortage. And it shouldn't be a surprise given the conditions that we expect truck drivers to work under. So truck drivers are not safe where they stop. There's no toilet, there's no facilities. Nobody has taken an approach to providing that around Europe. So you can only imagine the stress of working under a situation where if you don't make the delivery at a certain day, at a certain time, in a certain way, your wage won't be paid. And to make that, what you have to do is to stop in places which aren't secure and where there are no facilities. So the directive on psychosocial risks will allow us to look at all of those issues and to address them in a way that makes the work psychologically safe. It's also for bus drivers. You meet bus drivers. Life expectancy of bus drivers is actually low. That's the fact of the stress of driving a bus. It will cut your life short. That's not me making that number up. That's science. That's only that number. So there are real problems in sectors, and having in place the directive on psychosocial risks gives us the tool to address those in a way that we have all the truck drivers that we need, without having labour shortages of truck drivers or asking people to do a job that's going to have a negative impact on their health and their longevity.
What about having the mothers that we need? There's a question from Make Mothers Matter. It's about work-life balance. Women, and in particular mothers, play a role of shock absorbers in crisis. How do we make sure that unpaid work, essential for societies, doesn't bring poverty and other social injustices to mothers?
They do, and science tells us that. I have no problem as a feminist saying that. No problem at all as a feminist saying that. Research has shown that having a common day off reduces stress. It used to be the case that the directive on working time in Europe said Sunday was the normal day off. And then we all decided, well, that's a bit wrong, and we'd get rid of it. No problem whether it's Sunday, but there should be a common day off in Europe, because families being able to get together does reduce stress. People being able to play sports on a day reduces stress. People knowing that they'll all be able to get together in a guaranteed way reduces stress. So I don't have a problem with those points. Where they become a problem is where we say the role of women in the family, or the role of women is to have children, or that's the primary role of women. It's not. Every woman needs to choose for herself whether to have a family or not, the type of family she wants, the person that she loves. Every woman needs to be able to do that, and that's what we stand up for in Europe. We stand in Europe so that every woman can make her own choice. Every man can make his own choice. Every person, no matter what their gender is welcome, respected, and there's a place for you. You choose how you live your own life in Europe, and that's what makes it a great place to live and work. It's how we're strong. It's that we shouldn't undermine or go backwards on that. But I have every support. I'm a mother myself, so I know how tough that is. I know the extra burden that you do in the day of work, because you're also thinking about, how do I make sure everything is there for my family. But what I've witnessed, and this is the great thing, is what I've witnessed now, particularly in my own work, is young men taking that up. I think the role of men, I think that men have really stepped up in relation to, say, helping with the family. I see people taking paternity leave. I'm very happy that I never thought when I started working we'd ever even have paternity leave. So I'm positive that we can create workplaces and a rhythm of work which supports families and which supports people to be able to have and to choose whatever family and whatever type of family, whatever mix and blend that they want to have. Everybody should be able to be who they are.
Can I ask you about a work in progress, excuse the pun? The Platform Work Directive has been approved by the Parliament. It got initial approval from the European Council, but we got to get final approval from the Council. And after these latest elections, we'll see what happens. But the ETUC has said it is a step forward, but it's watered down. The presumption of employment could have been stronger, and the chapter on algorithmic management could have prompted fully fledged collective bargaining rights. Can you comment a little bit more on that, the Platform Work Directive, the gig economy? Right.
So I have never witnessed the amount of lobbying in my life before that went in to try and prevent that directive coming into place, and it was extraordinary. And it was extraordinary because it was based on a value that said that not everybody's labour is worthy of protection. And that's why it was so important for us to win it, because everybody's labour is worthy of protection. But simply the fact that you have a bicycle doesn't make you a CEO. So it was so important that we held accountable the employers. And it was so important that we did it at this moment, because during the COVID crisis, all of those delivery workers showed up and brought us medicine and food when we couldn't leave our houses. And we couldn't then, when we came out of COVID, after saying we're going to build back better, leave the very people we relied on hanging and say to them, no, you can wait to some other time and we'll recognise and respect your labour some other time and in some other way. What we had to do was to make sure that the directive was very clear. Every worker is entitled to fair pay, to all of the protections against sexual harassment, protection against health and safety, so that everybody's hour of labour is equally worthy of protection. And that was what was so important about that. Now, as to the actual question, which is whether or not it was good enough, no. Has it solved all the problems? No. But that's why we're going to have to use all of the tools at our disposal. We have to get that legislation implemented, but we can't let that be the only thing that we do. We need to encourage those workers to join trade unions, to join with us, to join with the rest of the movement, and to make each of the stands for their rights in their sector, in the trade union, along with everybody else. But that's why it was so important to make it very clear that workers, all workers, are equally entitled to a quality job and to respect for the work that they do.
How would you maybe answer, critics who might say, well, if you attach too many rules to the platform economy, you're going to be stifling a key part of the economy that is growing. How would you answer that?
Yeah, so this all comes down to what we mean by too many rules. So saying to an employer, you're responsible to make sure that the working hours of somebody are, we say, properly managed and that they get paid for that work and that they're safe when they go about doing it, that's not too many rules. That's a threshold of decency. So for us, and this is we say the real strength for workers of the European Union, is that we say there's a certain level below which it's unacceptable in Europe that simply because you find somebody who needs to do it out of that they're struggling so hard that they will put up with it, that doesn't make it okay. There's a threshold below which it's unacceptable for us to compete. We compete above that. We compete on being better. We compete on being the best, on the most innovative, the most energetic, the most forward-thinking, the best way of doing things. We do not compete in Europe on cutthroat terms and conditions and being the cheapest and the nastiest. That's not what Europe is about. That's not our strength. It will never be our strength. We shouldn't aim for it to be our strength. We should drive high road competition. And we do that by having a threshold of decency everywhere in Europe.
Now, before I move to David Lungo, Managing Director of Indra's office in Brussels, to make a comment, I have one final question to you. I know that you worked in a chip factory back in the 80s. Yes. And Iratxe mentioned it, actually, too. Yeah. Was there a light bulb moment when you were there that told you, I need to do what you're doing now?
Oh, yeah, wow. So I think I got caught by, so it was a very, very long time ago, just to say that I was only almost 20 when I stood for election, and the reason I stood for election was because workers would come to me and they say, I think this is wrong, I think that's wrong, and I think that we could do things better, and that's not fair, and in particular about overtime and who was selected for overtime. And so what I witnessed was, rather than having individuals disagreeing about the overtime and it becoming like a divide and conquer between the workforce and a thing that made it impossible to have a pint together on a Friday or to have lunch together. Instead of that, by sticking together, we could come up with a fair system that would fairly share out the overtime in a way that the workers wanted it, and all we needed to do was to get management to agree to it. That was what we were working on. And I noticed that because I was dealing with a reasonable employer, that they were very interested in the solutions that we were putting forward. And I noticed that the place ran better, we were more productive, everyone was happier. It's simply by bringing workers together, having that discussion and having a manager who was open. And then I saw that in the workplace, I saw that in the sector, I saw that at national level in Ireland. I was involved in the negotiations, which were for a big deal for the pay increases for the country and everything else. And then I came to Europe and said, what Europe needs is a lot more discussion and negotiation, and I'm just so encouraged by the great trade unions that there are in Europe, and I regularly wake up and I just can't believe that I have this great job. This is the best job, really, like really. I know people say I've got the best job in the world. I really do. So I love being the General Secretary of the ETUC. Yeah.
So hope for social dialogue started way back there for you. But before we get a final comment from you, can we hear from David Luengo, who Managing Director, Indra's office in Brussels. Indra is one of the sponsors of this event.
I hope you're not too angry, David.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Lynch. You have a quality job. Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning, guests, dear guests, Ambassador, Embajador, Secretary General, all friends. Dear Ms. Lynch, thank you very much. On behalf of the sponsors, Airbus, AEG, Solaria, Telefonica, and Indra, I sincerely thank you for your very passionate and inspiring ideas. I am working class as well. And my mother was for 40 years a nurse. So very, very inspiring ideas indeed in the name of labor. And I thank you and appreciate very much. Just, I mean, you've been going deep into several ideas, many ideas to strengthen the union. Absolutely, I fully agree. I will not praise or criticize anything you said. Just let me focus on a couple of things you maybe didn't mention or I would like to stress. First, yes, popular dissatisfaction. You said about dissatisfaction many things. I think this is not new. Maybe the new thing is the channels that we use to show dissatisfaction, and the digital social networks have something to do with that. And we need all our society, politicians, trade unions, companies, we need to drive this energy into something of value for society, especially with the young, with the youth. But yes, there are new realities. New realities we need to adapt. And technology, I'm coming from a technology company, Indra. Tech is really changing our lives, our society, the way we work, our economies. Software is radically changing all of this. You know about a little bit about that. I saw in Twitter you were the other day talking about algorithm management in labor. This is happening and very fast. So, and in the working environment, precisely this is very sensitive. I fully agree. Work is an extension of personality. It has to be entrepreneurial in a certain way. It has to be, I mean, to achieve something that is also good for the others in the corporation or in our community is self-fulfilling. So work is something that we need to take care. And it has an individual dimension, but it also has a corporate dimension. It also has a social dimension, of course. So yes, it is about quality jobs, but it is about performance and commitment to the corporation, to the enterprise. And for me, the enterprise, the goal of the enterprise is not profit. Profit is not the goal. The profit is a condition. The goal of the enterprise is to serve the customers, to serve the community, to be responsible to the communities, to be responsible for the society. It has to be good for society. Well, in this context, what is the role of an enterprise in the era of artificial intelligence, supercomputers, semiconductors, green fuels, electric planes? My colleagues of Airbus know a little bit about that. I think we can agree on two essential goals. One is competitiveness. In the current world, we need to compete. This is not easy. Yeah? This is going to be challenging. This is going to be very challenging for all of us. So we need to understand that in Europe, the internal market is not anymore a goal. The internal market is a platform to compete globally. It's a condition to compete. I'm sure that the Commission will prepare soon a competitiveness law. So we love legislative acts in Brussels, you know. And second, it is about responsibility. It's about environmental responsibility, it's about social responsibility, it's about governance responsibility. This is paramount in my company, in Indra. This is at the very highest level in our board of directors. Just for you to know. So, all this brings me to finally a bit of final reflection. What is the role of the European Union today, at this very moment in time? Being aware about the tech transition, the tech revolution, the two transitions that you mentioned that we need to take care of, the consequences to the way we work, the way we live. I think we need to focus, and I feel that our members of parliament and colleagues in the council, and should also make a reflection on that. We need to reflect on which are the EU common goods that we need to take care of, that we need to invest in, that we need to focus on, and we need to deliver together. And this together is something that matters a lot.
David, I think we need to move on to a response from, yes. Okay.
Rather than focusing on legislative tools, dear friend, maybe we should reflect on, proactively, on a new social paradigm. Yeah. And why not invest, innovate, compete, perform, excel to lead the future together? Thank you very much.
David Longo, thank you, David. Thank you very much, David. And a final word from Esther, please.
So I'm going to catch the ball that you bounced.
Good.
And I'm going to say the ETUC is available for that discussion. What we need is employers to come and discuss with us. So to take, I believe that there are more employers that we can work with, that we can build exactly that idea of the common good, the common goods, and also a world of work for quality jobs, that we can make sure that the regulatory environment supports that. And that there's investment, and that working together we can do that. So I genuinely catch that ball, and I'm open to it. And I know that Pepe will help us have that discussion with you.
Very good. Well, to Esther, to Iratxe, to David, and to you for your questions, thank you very much. Please, and thanks to our sponsors as well. And keep in mind, hashtag Forum Europa, hashtag Forum Europa for any pictures or ideas or comments on this event. I'm Chris Burns. See you next time. Thank you.